paper for a roommate to start with. People would write to her, she would go out and meet them, and she lived a pretty complete life. And if you go back in time, she had much more credibility than I did. She was able to get credit cards where I couldn't. She saw a psychiatrist. She lived many, many adventures during that time of possibilities.
And she wasn't just you, right? Wasn't this?
This is Roberta when she was visiting her psychiatrist. But we did eventually have 3 multiples because I wanted to see, because Roberta had such negative experiences, and essentially she was an archetype of a woman, a blonde woman, who lived during that time, so that she, as I said, she reflected all the things that woman would go through, which were fairly negative. So I did have 3 other women go out as her eventually.
A theme that gets picked up in Technolust,
yes,
when you have the splitting of the genome, right, into 3 different. And then let's see,
that's her driver's license.
So she had a driver's license.
She did. She had, as I said. Yeah. I'm just lucky that this project was done pre-computer. I would have been in jail for identity theft or fraud if it was 10 years later, because I think people tried it then.
Yeah.
And nobody laughed.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then there's the Roberta.
These are the multiples.
Look-alike contests. That's really wonderful, and they're doing it. They are definitely striking the pose. And then this one is...
That's Roberta meeting somebody who was explaining to her how to get on, how to have the government consider you crazy so that you would get a monthly stipend. And she had a tape recorder in her purse, and these were all recorded. I have the recordings.
Yeah, it was a different time. It was a very different time. And then
that's her exorcism. After everybody kept having difficult experiences with Roberta, I decided it was time to have her shift from this victimhood into a victorhood. So we held a 24-hour exorcism in Lucretia Borgia's crypt, of all places, where we burnt her photograph, and the ashes went into her urn, and she lay in state for 24 hours.
Okay, I did not know that meaning of this photograph. But then Roberta gets reconfigured as Cyber Roberta. And what is this instance?
Well, Roberta ended around 1979, and then, flash forward to 1993, and the internet is invented. And Cyber Roberta is a telerobotic doll. One eye is to both eyes are camera. One are cameras. One goes into the room that somebody looks at her in. The other one goes to the internet, and they capture whoever's looking at her in the room, and put that image up on the internet. And you can, from the internet, you can go right now to Cyber Roberta. LynnHershman.com/CyberRoberta, and you press on her left eye or her right eye, and her head moves 180 degrees, so that she is essentially is a surveillance system. So I'd have her in my studio, and her head would be moving around. I could check what was going on when I was traveling. She's like a pre-nanny cam.
I was just going to say a pre-nanny monitor. Oh, these good ideas. Okay, and let's see, this is an installation.
And this is MoMA's installation of Roberta, and there was Boris Sharvets has a dance company, and the dancers became entranced with Roberta, and wherever Roberta plays, they put on her dress and perform as Roberta during the exhibition.
So it becomes transmedia as kind of participation, right?
Yeah, what happened, it was in an exhibition, and this work was, people were told this work is fragile, it's 50 years old, don't touch anything, but the dancers were performing there, and they said that they just couldn't help themselves, that it took over, and they had to wear the wig and the dress, and the guards thought it was part of the performance, so they were dancing around in it all night, and then decided to do it every in the future.
That's wonderful. And so there's a wonderful kind of come around then with this, which is this is a project, and some people are saying it's not art, but then talk about the prudence juris and some of the, so one other identity genre, which is the pseudo-anonymous reviewer.
Yes. Well, again, in the 70s, it was very difficult for women to show in galleries. I know that's hard to believe these days when you have 3 to 5% women in galleries. You see, but in those days, you didn't have any. So what I did was I took I just invented 3 critics. Herbert Good, which is Yerba Buena, translated, Gay Abandon, and Prudence Juris. And they would write for different magazines about Lynn Hershman's work. And since most of this was done by mail in those days, you didn't talk, you could use the mail. They didn't know who was writing these things. So one was Studio International, and they would write in the styles, 3 different styles of writing, and these all got published. And so I took all these articles into some galleries, and they were so shocked that somebody was writing about a woman's work that I thought I'd go my first show. And I thought, this is dishonest. It's no more dishonest than not looking at women's work.
And good girls don't make history, right? Exactly. So one of the so we're now going to turn to the after digital, because you were starting to move that way with cyber, telerobotic roberta, and you go from performing the person to performing the body, which is kind of a script of pieces and identity breadcrumbs of Roberta, to then programming interactive bodies, or programming conversations between bodies, people, visitors, users, and some mediated body. So let's talk about Lorna. Lorna's interesting.
Lorna was actually a project for a linear videotape that was done at Texas Tech in Lubbock. And I had the idea to do something that was interactive, because I had read that the National Gallery was doing something interactive, but they had never heard of doing this, so I just shot the piece there. And the way Lorna works is, as opposed to Roberta, who would go out into the world and have these adventures, with Lorna it was about an agoraphobic that you sat in her room and used the remote switch, and you would access her history and future just through the remote. So the viewer became remotely her and could make decisions for her, and you could go backwards and forwards and find out all about her, make choices. And this piece had 3 endings. One was where she stayed where she was. Another one was that she committed suicide. And the third, which was the worst option, she moved to Los Angeles.
Perfect, actually. Okay, and then this one, I'm not sure I know what this one is.
This is called America's Finest.
Okay.
And it's a camera gun, and in which you look through the scope and you pull the trigger, and as you pull the trigger you see a history of warfare that used guns. This was the gun that was used in Vietnam, but there's also a hidden camera that puts you as the aggressor into the scope. So you become, by pulling the trigger, you become also the voyeur and the aggressor to the whole system and cycle of aggression.
Interesting. So first-person shooter games would have been an antecedent, thinking through that space of the first-person shooter.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that piece. One of the things I was, interested in or seeing this is that in many cases, it wasn't that you were just picking up emergent media forms and wondering, oh, what can I do with them? It's that there was this sense in that you were asking questions, moving into a kind of a problem space or possibility space, or a question space, and it seems like you grabbed the technology to do what you needed it to do, or needed the question. You took the technology that could address the question that you were already kind of gnawing at. And so I think now we're looking at this one, which this is the interactive piece.
At
It's
our house.
Right,
Yeah.
that we just saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about this? This too is not, you weren't doing this because the technology was already there. It's like you were already moving in that direction.
Actually, in most of these pieces, the technology
Wasn't
there.
even there, that's, yes.
But
yeah.
I live in the Bay Area, and there were a lot of
Yeah.
out-of-work programmers
Yeah.
so, who really wanted to do something that didn't depend on commerce, that
Mhm.
were interested in pushing
Mhm.
what was possible.
Right.
So, and after Lorna, I wanted to do something that you didn't just type into.
Right.
I wanted to do something that engaged the viewer's body
Right.
and really had a direct contact. And this one was the first one that used a touchscreen. And so
Right.
you actually touch the woman's body, and where you touch it, moved the story into
Right.
different iterations of possibilities, whether you met a Zen master or you met a demon, things that would happen to you. You could go slow, you could go backwards, and it's about really confronting yourself on a journey.
Right. And again, interacting, but in a very different